The snow fell heavy that night, swallowing the small town in silence, blanketing the world in a white so thick it seemed to erase everything except the glow of a few lonely street lights. Roads were buried, cars abandoned, and winds howled through empty streets like restless ghosts. But at the very edge of town, tucked behind a crooked picket fence, stood a little wooden house with smoke curling from its chimney. Inside, a kind old lady named Margaret sat alone by her fire, knitting quietly, her gray hair pinned back, her wrinkled hands steady despite the storm's rage. She had lived many winters in that house, but this one felt especially lonely. With her husband gone for years, and her children scattered in faraway cities, the nights often felt longer than the days. That evening, as the blizzard roared louder, she closed her eyes and whispered a prayer that everyone out there in the cold might find warmth and shelter. She had no idea how quickly that prayer was about to be answered or how her life would change forever. Before we dive deeper into this story, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion, please take a moment to like this video, share it with your friends, comment below what kindness means to you, and don't forget to subscribe to Kindness Corner so we can keep bringing you stories that warm the heart. The knock came suddenly, rattling the old door so hard Margaret nearly dropped her knitting. She hesitated, her heart racing. At her age, unannounced visitors in the middle of the night during a storm like this were almost unheard of. She shuffled to the door, clutching her shawl tightly, and when she opened it, the sight before her made her gasp. Standing there in the whirling snow were 15 men, broad-shouldered and leather-clad, their jackets marked with patches that carried a name feared by many, Hell's Angels. Their beards were thick with ice, their faces red from the bitter cold, and their boots sunk deep in the snow. Behind them, motorcycles leaned against one another, nearly buried in the drift, their chrome now frosted white. For a moment, Margaret felt her knees tremble. These were men the world whispered about. Tough bikers, troublemakers, men most would cross the street to avoid. But then she saw it. Beneath their hardened exteriors, beneath the tattoos and the frostbitten scowls, they were shivering. Their lips were blue, their hands stiff, their eyes tired. Whatever else they were, tonight they were human beings caught in a storm that could easily take their lives. Without another thought, Margaret stepped aside and said simply, "Come in before you freeze." The bikers glanced at each other, surprised. Most people slammed doors in their faces. Yet here was a frail woman, no taller than their shoulders, opening her warm home to them without hesitation. They filed in one by one, stomping snow from their boots, their presence filling the tiny house until it seemed to groan beneath the weight of leather and steel. Margaret's living room, once quiet and lonely, now pulsed with the heat of 15 bodies thawing beside her fireplace. Margaret didn't waste time. She hurried to the kitchen, pulling out whatever food she could find. Bread, canned soup, leftover stew from her dinner. It wasn't much, but she served it with a smile, bustling around her kitchen as though she had expected this company all along. The bikers sat awkwardly, their massive frames squeezed onto her floral couches and wooden chairs, unsure how to act. They weren't used to kindness like this. They weren't used to being seen as men in need rather than men to be feared. As the hours passed, the storm grew worse, pounding against the windows like a beast desperate to break in. The bikers stayed, telling Margaret bits of their story. They had been traveling from state to state when the storm caught them off guard, and with the highways closed and motel full, they had nowhere to turn. Their bikes had nearly frozen solid outside, and without shelter, they wouldn't have lasted till morning. Margaret listened quietly, her eyes kind steady as she poured more coffee and laid out blankets she had stored away. One by one, the tough bikers dozed off, wrapped in quilts that smelled faintly of lavender and age, their loud snores echoing in the little house. Margaret sat awake for a long time, watching them sleep, a strange warmth filling her heart. She had never had sons, but tonight, in some strange way, she felt as though she had been given 15 of them. By dawn, the storm had passed. The world outside glistened, covered in fresh snow that sparkled like diamonds in the pale morning sun. The bikers rose slowly, stretching, rubbing their eyes, and thanking Margaret in their gruff voices. They ate a simple breakfast she had prepared, scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee. And when they finally stepped outside, they found their bikes half buried but still intact. Before leaving, their leader, a tall man with steel-gray eyes, turned to Margaret and said, "Ma'am, we won't forget this ever." She simply smiled, patting his arm, and wished them safe travels. Then, just as quickly as they had arrived, the 15 bikers rode away, the roar of their engines fading into the distance, leaving Margaret alone once more in her quiet house. She thought that would be the end of it. Just a strange, beautiful memory of one snowy night when her house became a haven for those the world called dangerous. But Margaret had no idea that kindness never fades. It echoes, multiplies, and comes back when you least expect it. The very next morning, just as Margaret was feeding the birds in her snowy yard, she heard a sound that made her stop in her tracks. It was faint at first, like distant thunder rolling across the hills. Then it grew louder. The ground seemed to tremble. Margaret clutched her shawl and stepped closer to the fence, her heart racing. Down the long road leading to her house, she saw them bikes. Not 10, not 20, but one after another, stretching as far as the eye could see. 100 motorcycles, their engines roaring, their riders wearing the same leather jackets with the same insignia. They pulled up slowly, lining both sides of the street until Margaret's little house was surrounded, the air thick with the scent of gasoline and snow. Neighbors peeked nervously from their windows, unsure of what was happening. But Margaret just stood there, speechless, tears welling in her eyes. From the front of the line, the tall leader dismounted his bike, walking toward her with something in his hand. He smiled, not the kind of smile that hides mischief, but one that carried respect and gratitude. He handed her a bouquet of fresh flowers, though in the dead of winter it must have been nearly impossible to find them. "We told the brothers what you did for us," he said. "Word spread. You gave us shelter when no one else would. We don't forget things like that." And then Margaret saw it. From the backs of their bikes, they unloaded bags of groceries, stacks of firewood, and boxes filled with warm clothes, blankets, and supplies. Some even carried tools to repair her fence, to shovel her driveway, to fix the squeaky hinge on her porch door. For hours they worked, filling her little house and yard with the hum of life. Her home, once so quiet, now rang with laughter, the clink of tools, and the rumble of motorcycles. She hadn't felt this alive in years. That day, Margaret realized something powerful: kindness has a ripple effect. What she had given freely without expectation, had returned a hundredfold. In a world that often seemed cold and divided, she had discovered that even the hardest hearts could be softened by compassion. The Hell's Angels, men often branded as dangerous, showed a side few ever got to see, a side that remembered gratitude, loyalty, and honor. As the sun began to set, the bikers gathered in front of her yard, engines revving in unison, a thunderous salute to the woman who had opened her door when the storm threatened their lives. Margaret stood on her porch, her eyes shining with tears, waving as they rode off one by one, the roar echoing through the snowy valley until silence returned once more. But her house would never feel empty again. She knew that somewhere out there she had family now, family on two wheels, bound not by blood, but by kindness. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of compassion, please like this video, share it with others who need hope, and subscribe to Kindness Corner so we can continue spreading stories that prove kindness can change the world. And before we close, I'd love to hear from you. Would you have opened the door that night? Comment below and let's talk about the courage it takes to choose kindness even when the world tells us to be afraid. Margaret's story is not just about one snowy night. It is about the truth that kindness is never wasted. It plants seeds that bloom in unexpected ways. Sometimes all it takes is a warm fire, a simple meal, and a door left open in the storm to change not just 15 lives, but 100 or maybe more. And in the quiet of her little house, as she sat by the fire that night, Margaret smiled, knowing she was never truly alone again.